Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our last program for Women's History Month. Today, we're going to be talking about women and spirituality in daily life. And we have great panelists for you. And we're going to talk about the intersection between Islam, mental health, and just wellness in general. I'm Ayan Arjeen, the Care Communications Manager, and I'm joined with Zaina Ghalawanji, CARE's staff attorney. How are you, Zaina?
Good. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for joining tonight, and we can just get started if you want to introduce our guests, and I'll bring them on.
Okay, so our first guest is Lynn Nashawati. Lynn is an attorney and a former prosecutor for Oakland County. Following her time with the prosecutor's office, she opened up her own criminal defense firm, Nashawati Law.
Assalamu alaikum, Lynn.
Assalamu alaikum.
How are you?
Good, alhamdulillah. How are you guys?
Alhamdulillah.
So I'm going to also introduce our next guest. Along with Lynn, Fatima Salman is going to join us. She is currently working at the University of Michigan School of Social Work on the Engage team. She works on employment equity solutions for Detroit, and she's a mother of 3 boys and a social worker / community organizer.
Salams, guys.
Assalamu alaikum.
How are you guys?
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you both for joining us. I'm really excited to have you both on. I've known you both for a really long time, and I'm just excited that we have you on this Facebook Live. I know you have extensive experience with what we're about to talk about, and it's just generally really good to have you.
We're just happy that you have an all-Michigan panel.
Yeah.
Well, I'm North Carolina, but
well, you're about to go to law school in Michigan, inshallah.
No way! I didn't know that. Okay.
Well, I mean, most people didn't know that, but Zaina just announced it to everyone.
Yeah. Now it's
It's what you were gonna know anyway.
It's really public now.
Very public. Thank you. But we can go ahead and get started. I'll take the first question for both of you guys. So my first question to y'all is, how has Islam or your faith informed your response to trauma, stress, and other life pressures? So Fatima, if you would like to start, and then we'll go to Lynn.
So, like, you know, when you guys had mentioned these questions, I was thinking about them, and I was thinking about how they've informed my life, but I think even more so, I was thinking about what it is that I do with my own kids in order to make sure that they have that understanding also, because as I've gotten older, and I'm older than all of you probably, I mean, I know I am, but as you get older, you realize how difficult life can get, the realities of what life end up becoming. And more than ever, you need your faith to let you continue on in this world. Like if I didn't have my faith, I have no doubt I would have fallen apart. So as I'm raising my kids, I keep on thinking to myself, well, what is it that they need? Because the reality is that life is, Allah has said that we will be tested, right? That's just a fact of life. Like, you can't deny that. And you're going to be tested with the things that you love the most. You're going to be tested in the things that are the most difficult for you. So, you know, what is it that what are those tools that you need? So this is something that I continue to think about, you know, as life goes on and as I raise my kids. I'm going to hand it over to Lynn in a little bit, but maybe we can kind of banter back and forth about this.
And honestly, I mean, my thoughts are pretty similar. I think that Islam it completely humbles me and grounds me. It just reminds me of how small I am. And if I'm small, that means my problems are small. It's just, it reminds me that not everything is catastrophic as it might feel in the moment. And I mean, that's something that I've been trying to implement in my personal and professional life, because sometimes things don't go as planned. Not sometimes, most of the time. And sometimes it really does just feel catastrophic. But when you've got your foundation, your Islamic foundation, and your faith there, it just takes you back. It completely grounds you. And it just reminds you how little control we really have over anything, over our successes or struggles, really anything in our life. And then going with what you were saying, Fatima, I feel like it also teaches us gratitude, because you said it, right? We're all going to be tested. And if it's not for these tests, I don't think we would have a lot of our blessings be highlighted in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Zaina.
Well, I was going to say, I really like the point you mentioned about life as a test. I was just speaking to my brother-in-law about this. He was talking about what a bad day and bad week he's been having generally. And we kind of discussed that. And I feel like it kind of makes you accept your problems, not resist as much. I feel like it's the resistance that really causes the stress and the pressure and the anxiety.
That's so true, Zaina. That's a really good point. It's like it's not necessarily accept it, but kind of like for example, like you're about to go through an obstacle course. You know what I mean? You don't know what's in that obstacle course, but stuff is going to spring up at you. So when it comes, you're surprised, but you're still not like your overall perception's not surprised because you're like, well, I'm in an obstacle course. You know what I mean? So it's like I just didn't know what I was going to get basically. So it kind of lifts you up from a 70,000 foot high angle and be like, okay, bring it on almost. You know what I mean? Not that you want like really hard things happening, but it's like, okay, Allah has said that it's going to happen. And so therefore, you're kind of more ready for it almost.
I think also the point Dean made about us being small and how that means our problems are even smaller. I that like really resonated. I think that's really a good reminder. And another thing that this conversation makes me think of is like the idea of nasib, like destiny, how there's something very freeing about that you're not in complete control of everything that happens. So you do your part, and then the rest is to Allah. And I think that relieves a lot of stress, because there's something stressful about not being in control, but then again, it's a weird like cycle of I know that there's someone better in control of what's happening. So I think that that's a good reminder. And also, Fatima, what you were just saying about kind of like the bring it on idea, there's also there's something relieving knowing that even the tests that come through our lives, how much good is behind those tests. Like even like the struggles that we go through now, that, there's and I think that without Islam, that would be something very difficult to just accept, that there's bad happening and there's no reason behind it. But with Islam, that something bad is happening and the benefit of it, like for after.
Mm-hmm. But then I also want, as we're talking, I feel like we are talking to one version of hardships and challenges, because there are those hardships and challenges that Allah sends, but then there are those hardships and challenges that we kind of put upon ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. So like if we slip, if we sin, if we make mistakes, not if, when we sin, when we make mistakes, when we slip up, there's that side also, right? So we talked about kind of bring it on, but then there's also the aspect of like when we do make mistakes, we also have that faith-based perspective of, well, this is what I got to do. Like I can get back up, I can keep on moving, and it's not the end of the world. And I don't have to keep on going down the wrong path. I can get back on this right path,
I think. Oh, go ahead, Dean.
Just going with what you're saying, Fatima, and I feel like that essentially having our faith is the difference is it gives us hope through all of this. Whether it's these small mistakes that we're making day to day, there's so much hope and optimism in knowing that who are we dealing with? We're dealing with Al-Ghaffar, right? We're dealing with Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. We're not dealing with another human who's flawed like us, who's going to judge us the way we judge each other. I think it's so beautiful, subhanAllah, how much hope we are able to rise out of our struggles with. And whether it's those kinds of struggles or, big traumatic events in your life. I love that in our faith, we have so many examples from prophetic examples, and just through hadith of very, very, I guess, grounding, humbling experiences that so many people experience. And Allah specifically telling us that, if you make it through this, you're going to be a better person in some way. Like just one specific example, something that I always found astounding is the hadith for mothers who handle or deal with miscarriages. And there's the hadith that says the miscarried child would pull his mother with his umbilical cord to paradise if she sought Allah's reward for it and was patient. What can give you more optimism than that, right? To show you that this is something that, so many people struggle with, but showing you that there's really a light at the end of the tunnel, that nothing that we go through, nothing that we do is lost on Allah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really beautiful point, that even like the toughest hardships, I feel like there's something beautiful behind it, like the hadith that you just mentioned. I mean, of course, it's easier said than done to be positive and optimistic when you're going through hardship. I think I tend to be more negative, and it's really hard for me to see the light, when I'm going through everything. But I think it's a really good reminder. Things might be bad, but there's beauty behind it, and there's going to be beauty at the end of the tunnel, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go on to our next question. So in what ways do mental health and Islam intersect? If we could maybe reference specific teachings, what does Islam say about mental health? I feel like I've always thought that they were kind of separate. Like anytime I've gone through something, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to pray and my problems will go away. Like if I'm stressed or anxious, and then they don't go away. And then down the line, I start therapy and I'm like, they're not separate. Like they're together, I feel like, if that makes sense. Can you guys talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think what's interesting is I think at least when I was growing up, is that they were very separate. Mental health was almost, even to a certain extent still is, it was like a taboo in our community, right? Like nobody really talked about it. You don't talk about it.
If I can build on that, not that nobody talked about it. Anybody who sought mental health treatment must have been lacking in their deen to need that mental health treatment.
Exactly. And so now, as alhamdulillah, as that connection is being brought forth by different centers like Khalil Center and Yaqeen, all these different places, it's more and more apparent and obvious that they are completely intertwined, right? And again, like I said earlier, as you guys had given us these questions, and I was thinking about this one. And the other day, I was in my own halaqah, and we were doing tafsir of one of the surahs, I'm trying to remember. But anyhow, I was talking about how it was Yasir Qadi's tafsir. And so he was talking about how the Quran, in Surah Rahman, how the Quran was created before even mankind was, right? And so Allah created the Quran, and then he created insan. And therefore the Quran is literally our guide. Like you don't, like when you're making a bed, making a crib, making whatever, right? You have the book there because that was made, and then that book is able to help you in making whatever it is that you're making, right? And so this Quran is literally our guide to this world. And in the Quran, there's all these stories of people and stories of things that happened to them and how they were able to overcome it. And there's so much mental health in those stories, and how Yaqub was able to be patient, and like all these different things about kind of like the humanness of who we are, right? And that humanness, connecting your personality, connecting your thought processes, connecting these things to really to Allah himself, because Allah is obviously the one who created all of us, right? And created even our personalities and created our humanness. So there's a complete correlation between them. And I'm grateful really that it's coming, like it's being brought up more and more, that these connections are being made.
Yeah, Fatima, what you just mentioned about the like Yaqub patience, that I think that reminder of he cried until he went blind, like over his son's, like the thought of his son dying. And I think that's a reminder in a lot of ways, like when people like about grieving, how it's such a normal thing, and that he obviously had so much faith that he did not let that get in the way of, like, he allowed himself to feel sad, and that didn't mean that he didn't have tawakkul, or like that was missing in some way. So what Lean said about in the community, this kind of known as you must be lacking in your faith, when I don't think anyone would say that about Yaqub, right? But obviously he was um, very affected by like a traumatic event that happened in his life. So if that happened to him, then what can we say for ourselves?
That's a really fair point. And I guess, I mean, with even with Islam and like faith, like their intersection, like how often do we think of like therapy and medication as a last resort when Islam and mental health and taking care of your mental health are so intertwined? I feel like I was like that too. Like I was kind of like, okay, I'll start therapy once, like if I pray and make dua and God will take my anxiety, but if God doesn't take away my anxiety, then I'll start therapy. I feel like that's the wrong approach.
I agree. You know, actually, it's interesting. The other day, a younger friend had texted me, and she goes, you know, I need some help. I need to find a mentor. And I go, well, what do you need? And she was like, well, I've got all these things going on. And she was like telling me all these layers of her life, right? And she's like, I need to find like a sheikh or a sheikha. And as she said, or a therapist. And she kept on talking about the layers and her family and this and that. And I said to her, honestly, you need a therapist first. Like, there's so many complexities in there that you need to, you know, Imam Ali says, if you know yourself, you know Allah, right? And that's part of therapy, is understanding yourself. And I'm talking as a social worker now, right? So understanding yourself and understanding who you are, what triggers you, what are your traumas, what makes you tick, what makes you not tick. You know what I mean? Those are things that you have to know, right? And it takes a therapist to help you with that. It can take a teacher to help you with that. And it takes all of the above, right? So there, you know, it's important to know that it's not necessarily going to a halaqah or like listening to a lecture that's going to help you in getting over your problems. Sometimes it's, you know, even deeper than that. And it takes a therapist sometimes to help unravel all those layers.
I think that that's a really good like lead into our next question of, and for both of y'all, how can someone dealing with stress or the pressures in life, how can they get support either through mental health or through like faith-based support? So Lean, if you would like to start, and then we can go to Fatima.
I mean, I think one of the most somewhat, I guess, obvious would be to go to therapy. And it's so interesting to me because I feel like this taboo that it's very cultural of, you know, like I said, you're lacking in something. Your life must be terrible if you're in therapy. You must be really weak that you can't handle the simple test that Allah gave you, because Allah gives everyone tests, right? When in fact, I honestly believe the people who are in therapy are the strongest people, because to even have it in you and to have it in you to even start that path, it's a lot of work, right? It's not a easy or pleasant experience for people to face what they are and who they are and what triggers them, and to have somebody to actually tell them what they need to work on. So I mean, I think that's number one. I think it'd be awesome if everybody was in therapy, because we'd have a lot less problems in this world and a lot less cultural issues that we carry with us. But I think that's such a huge tool that Allah has given us. And just like we take medicine, why not? Why not?
So like I guess, like we mentioned medicine, we mentioned going to therapy, like those things are important. How does one, like in the past, I've looked for therapists that are also like that use Islam in their therapy sessions. Is that a thing, Fatima? You mentioned like a couple of organizations.
Yeah, so I mean, Khalil Center is a great organization, a great group. They're, you know, based out of California and Chicago, and they have a different, I think, little like satellite centers, I think. Um, but at this, and they are completely intertwined, the faith-based perspective. The problem is that they have a waiting list of like 50 people every, like, you know, I mean, a really long waiting list, because everybody's trying to get into those, you know, therapy programs. Because I think people recognize that they want, you know, I mean, if you've, you know, you know, I've gone to a non-Muslim therapist, and that's hard. You have to like explain what sacrifice it, like, it's really complicated. Like, they don't get it. They're like, what sacrifice for what? Like, it doesn't make sense to them. And that's also, I mean, again, speaking as a social worker, that's also part of their own lack of cultural competency, right? But at the same time, like, it's really difficult to be in that seat and being vulnerable already, and then you're like trying to like teach somebody about your dean and being like, well, this is who I, like, it's really hard. So yes, of course you'd want to go, but at the same time, you don't have to go to Khaleej Center. There are people in your community probably who are also, probably Muslims, and are also therapists. Or, another idea is, and this has worked for a lot of people that I know, is going to therapists who see Muslims already, because then they already kind of get that worldview. Keeping in mind, though, Muslims might not necessarily want a faith-based perspective too, right? So we have to keep that in mind, because we're not all a monolith. Let's keep that in perspective. But one thing that we do in Michigan, yay Michigan, is we always have, like, for example, we have an imams council here, and so we always have the imams council. Like, when they get together, we always have different mental health professionals that actually come in and talk to them about, like, the different issues that are going on in the community. So, like, let's say divorce and stuff like that, they'll come and talk about the mental health perspective. And so at least at the imams, because that's typically the first person you'll go to, right, is the imam. And so at least so that the imams can understand how to at least start off with that process, and then after a certain point move them to the therapist process. So that's also another way that communities can at least try to get some sort of, like, correlation between the two.
And then if we're talking about not just for the people who might not be ready to take that step, because it is a big step for a lot of people. I remember when I was struggling with anxiety, the first thing I did was I found a bunch of self-help books, and I really feel like those do help. One of my favorite books is Secrets of Divine Love. It focuses sometimes we focus about the logistics, about the actual rules of Islam, but that book focuses so much on God's love for you that it really puts a lot of your struggles in perspective. There's also so many podcasts, like Fatima said, there's a lot of different organizations that have that. For example, one of the ones that touched me the most is the Sira series by Yasir Qadi. Extremely long series, and it's super detailed, but in the details is where you see the humanity that makes you, it just shows you, like, look, people dealt with these same, fundamental issues, and they made it through. And then it might sound, cliche, but the Quran, like, and I know that most of us here are not so well versed in, like, Quranic vocabulary. I actually found there's a Quran that it's like word for word translation, and it writes the translation. It reads like a story. And I honestly feel like if your intentions are pure and you pick up the Quran and you're struggling with something, Allah's going to, subhanAllah, every single time it's happened to me, I open it and there's a message in there for me. And I really love that.
I love that you mentioned that. The Quran, like, as someone, like, I struggle with understanding what I'm reading, but I remember when I had such severe anxiety in law school, the way I tried to work on that was by actually waking up and reading Quran, even if it was like a page or two, and somehow that calmed me down. But even without understanding what I was reading, like, I was just calm, like, reading the words, but even, like, listening to it, I think is really calming. There were also other things, like the self-help books. I've definitely done that. I think I've read, like, every single self-help book, and I feel like a mindfulness expert, right?
I think you got me on the self-help book train.
Oh my gosh. There's so many out there right now, though. There's definitely a core of them that are really good, that you can easily, like, Google and, like, find, like, the core self-help books. I think also, like someone else got me into this, but, like, I'm not a physical exercise person at all. I hate the gym. But yoga was so good at incorporating both, like, the physical aspect of working out and this mindfulness of allowing your thoughts to kind of run through your head and observing them without letting them take control of you. And meditation too helps. I feel like yoga, meditation, salah, all those things together are very similar and have also helped. I don't know. At Fatima, we were just discussing self-help books and Quran and all these things that can help.
Yeah. No, sorry, I was on and out and off. My internet got messed up, but I've always been the advocate of mind, body, soul. It's all three, right? That's how Allah created us. It is mind, body, soul. It's if it's not yoga. I mean, I work and again, right? This is all about who you are, recognizing yourself, recognizing what it is that's going to help you um, get to that peace inside of you. I don't know if I got cut off. Sorry about that, but so yeah, meditation, obviously, in whatever form it takes. And then those things, I think it's actually very fascinating that things like yoga and meditation and stuff are on the rise, because I think that it just shows how troubled people are inside, right? I think that the world has become this really noisy, social media, too much stimulation type of world, and we and the fact that so many people are searching is even more proof of the need for Islam, the need for grounding, the need for a deen to be able to ground you, you know?
Well, I think it's interesting that you guys bring up meditation because honestly, I feel like when I see meditation or like even the description of what you're supposed to do, I'm like, that sounds so much like Slana. Like, is it just me? Right? Like there's so much resemblance between, I mean, Slana is like meditation. And another thing, the self-help books, when you were talking about you were describing one, it reminded me of, um, I got into Yasmin Mogahed's book, The Reclaim Your Heart, and it made me realize how much like that reminder of it's a lot about like a void, like filling a void with Islam. And just honestly, sometimes when I would just feel low, I would read that and there would be like a message there. And like it would just remind me that there is a lot of like I don't know. I connect a lot of sadness to like voids, and then when I start to get better at my salah and stuff like that, it helps. So I feel like there really is a like that's where it's like a personal journey for everyone. But I feel like that's, for example, like where mind comes in, of like how faith can help. But if either of you guys have anything like final thoughts or just something you want to leave with our audience before we close off. Also, Lean, can you tell us the
Yeah.
Quran that you mentioned?
I will look up. So the only place in the U.S. that I found that sells it, it's called Siraj Bookstore. I think they're in New Jersey. I think it says like word by word Quran. I can send it to you guys. I don't know if there's a way to put it up, but it's amazing.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like it's a game changer. I feel like every Muslim American household should have one because it really brings the Quran to you a little bit more than it does for people who might not understand the vocabulary if they just pick up an Arabic Quran. But in terms of what you were saying, like any just closing remarks, I mean, I think just our discussion and always when I think about this, I just feel like, alhamdulillah, we are so blessed. We're so blessed that we have a religion that reminds us how temporary our life is, how small we are, and that our life in itself is just a reminder that with every struggle that we have, every trauma, it's going to pass. We're going to get through it. And what I always tell myself is, I've been through hard things before. Allah has gotten me through them before. Who am I to doubt his mercy on me now?
That's beautiful. I just want to step back for a second and say, when you are looking at self-help books or like self-help gurus, even to a certain extent, be careful because sometimes the actual framework is not necessarily the framework of Islam itself. So, for example, and I'll just give a really basic example, is like, you do you. Actually, no, like you do what Allah said. You know what I mean? Like, so we have to be careful that that we are going into those like if you're grounded, I mean, that's different, right? Then you're able to decipher what is within the scope of Islam, what is within the scope of hadith and all of that. So that's it's easier. But if you're not, then just be careful and kind of have somebody on the side that you can kind of bounce ideas, especially if maybe if you have a book club and you can kind of discuss and digest a little bit to make sure that you're getting the right kind of ideas. Because again, if you're going into it with a framework that's not grounded in God, then it's a little bit difficult. I want to end by saying thank you to Care National for doing this. You know, it's a really great thing to be able to bring in women, but then also this idea of mental health, because it is actually Social Work Month, by the way, also. So great job, guys. But you know, it's a, life is a struggle, and you know, I'm always reminded that you know, it's a struggle because Allah wants us to reach Him pure. That's how He wants us to reach Him, right? The end goal is to become pure and purified, so that inshallah our end abode is Jannah, inshallah. So these things are not meant to harm us. They're not meant to hurt us, but rather they're meant to get us to a better place and a higher level, inshallah. So inshallah, we can keep all those things in mind as we move forward in life, inshallah.
Thank you both for joining us. I produce these shows, so I'm here for all of them, you know, the back end, even if I'm not on. And I have to say, this has been one of my favorite I'm so happy that I was actually able to be a part of it, because I really enjoyed this topic. So thank you both for joining us and speaking about this. And thank you, Dana, for co-hosting. So this was a great way to end off our Women's History Month campaign, and we'll be starting diversity, like a diversity campaign next month as well as Ramadan. So inshallah, everyone tune in for that. We're gonna have a lot of great programs coming up. But thank you everyone for joining tonight, and Assalamu alaikum.